Yeah, three, two, one. Welcome to the Lightforge. This is Adwikta.
This is Merps. Got a lot to talk about this week. Lots of stuff happened on our end and obviously on Blizzard's end as well in preparation for Boomsday. So
Boomsday. I'm
let's
getting a
start
little
off
more
with,
excited about Boomsday. My excitement meter has moved from like a 2 to like a 3.
well, that's good. You can't be too excited during the very first week, right? During the announcement that like, hey, here's some stuff. By the way, the expansion is still a month away. You can't ramp it up. You got to save yourself. You know, you're a seasoned vet when it comes to this, so your excitement level is appropriate.
Yeah, it's good to ramp up your excitement and so you don't wear out, right? And like that's what Blizzard knows, and that's what they've done this a few times. And so they used to like give one card a day, and that was like really painful for the reveals. And then they did like, oh, we're just gonna give you everything all at once in like 3 days, and then launch the expansion. And they're like, okay, we can maybe milk it a little more. And so now they settled on announcing it, waiting 2 weeks, and then revealing like a few cards every day, and that's good. But even in this mid-time, they're going to reveal a couple of cards. This happened with Witchwood too, and so we'll talk a little bit about what more information we have on Boomsday. But first, I really want to let you guys know, if you're a Lightforge listener, but you don't follow the tweets closely or Reddit, we have buckets now on the Lightforge tier list. Taro's in our chat right now. As you guys know, Taro and Jarkenhawk put together and has been maintaining really well the buckets list on a Google sheet for the past few months since we've had a bucket system. We've teamed up with Arena Drafts and gotten all the Arena Drafts data, and ZD Man is over there doing some voodoo statistic magic that I will not try to explain, but he's gotten it so that we can pull it automatically as long as Arena Drafts has data. So guys, please, and he's also upgrading Arena Drafts data system and a whole bunch of stuff over the course of the next week or so that it'll be in better shape with more features by the time it hits. By the time the expansion hits. So please, when that happens, give Arena Drafts a shot if you haven't already. If you have, go back, because we need data, especially when Boomsday happens. Like, you don't need to use it now. But when Boomsday happens, the faster Arena Drafts can have data, the faster we can actually get the buckets running. So that'll be nice. And in the meantime, I want to give a huge shout out again to Taro and Jarkenhawk for maintaining that. It's very accurate. We've had like, I think it was like 2 or 3 like disagreements by half a bucket, except for the bottom 3 sub buckets. So everything in the bottom large bucket and the second half of the second to last bucket, where there was like a bunch of disagreements. But at that point, it doesn't matter like as much. And we could be wrong, right? Like, I don't know. But that's I think at that point there needed to be like a lot more data, and I don't think they had access to it.
Yeah. So Taro and Jarkin were the first ones to grab data and sort of put it into a format in which people can see what the buckets were, and efforts like that, like it's so helpful for the arena community, right? And a lot of times it's just, I don't think it can be described as sexy work in any way, and we super duper appreciate people within the arena community who put in the work to benefit everyone.
Yeah,
right?
like we would have pushed for this like a lot sooner if we didn't have this. If we didn't have Taro and Jarkenhawk working on it. But when we saw that they were working on it and it was like really accurate and very useful, we were like, well, that's what we're using, so we'll just promote that for a while and not really like rush this out until Blizzard has it all set up. So it was really like a large help. And these are not like Jarkenhawk is like, I think a doctorate in like data management or something, like something like that. But really, it's amazing what people are in the community and what they do. But yeah, so it's now on the Lightforge. Just go on the lightforge.com. You'll be able to find it. We have it organized in the top parts of each bucket is on the top. The bottom parts of each bucket is on the bottom. I think our biggest difference with how the spreadsheet was organized is that we organize it vertically instead of horizontally when it comes to sub buckets, just because we don't want it to keep scrolling through like 17 buckets. Let us know how you feel about that. Maybe you like the horizontal bucketing more, and you're okay with a horizontal scroll, or we should make things smaller. I don't know. This looks okay to me. And also, we number the buckets the way we've always been talking about them on the Lightforge, which is that the first bucket is the best bucket, and the 7th bucket is the worst bucket. And they use the opposite numbering system before. We've been consistently like calling it like that, so we're sticking with this. But if you have a little bit of confusion, that could be where it's from. First bucket, best bucket. 7th bucket, worst bucket.
All right. Yep. So we have buckets. Check it out. It's just another way of making our tier list a little bit closer to how the arena actually works, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think it's a good explanation of what's new on our end. And next, we have some Boomsday card reveals this past week. We don't want to spend too much time on this because, as you guys probably know, we will do a big card review right before the expansion actually hits. But we do want to touch upon kind of the themes that we're seeing.
Are you excited about this? This time it's launching on a Tuesday, I think. Which I also think, I'm not 100% sure about this, they haven't announced this, but I think the data dump is on Friday.
Yeah.
And so that would mean our late night into 3 a.m. recording session for reviewing all the cards won't need to happen on a weeknight.
I know. That is pretty crazy. Although I don't want to sort of jinx it by assuming.
It's actually the data dumps are going to be on Monday night, and the release is going to be on Tuesday, and we're going to be
Or it's going to be one of those, surprises. It's like, we're not even going to dump. Just check out the cards. They're
already in the arena.
Oh, my God.
That would be a good throwback to how GVG actually happened, though. If you guys don't remember, in GVG, all the cards were available in Arena the weekend before they were actually constructed, and they didn't announce anything until, it was already in the arena. And they're like, by the way, some of you may see GVG cards in the arena. And by some of you, we mean all of you, because that's what the arena is right now. And everyone was like, oh my God, and everyone was playing the arena. And it was actually really fun. But it meant that I was on a bachelor party in Montreal with our good friend, and one that Merp should have been on as well. And rather than going out, it was the first night, I was like, I'm going to need to call Merps. And they're like, what? Why aren't you coming out with us? And I'm like, because there's this card game that me and Merps are really into, and we need to have a call so we can put all the scores of how good these cards are together so people can look at them.
Yep, indeed.
It made me the coolest person on that trip.
Super cool. Anyways, let's talk about some of the reveals. We want to focus on 2 big themes that we saw. So once again, we're not going to touch upon all the cards. We're not going to go through a detailed review of the cards. But let's talk about 2 of the things that we're really focused on this week. So first, let's go with just a class, Druid, right? Druid, they focused on it a tiny bit this week, and we know that one of the themes for Druid in Boomsday is going to be Treants. Which is weird. We've seen Beast Druid, we've seen Taunt Druid, now it's Treant Druid. And one of the cards, or I think the first 2 cards that really work with this, number 1 is Landscaping, which is a Druid spell, 3 mana, summon 2 Treants, right? It's going to be fine. Depending on the bucket, 3 mana for 4/4 total worth of stats, but split up. And then, to see how Druids benefit from it, one of the cards is a Mulch Muncher, which is a 10 mana 8/8 mech. It's a mech, which ties into the next theme. Haha. 10 mana 8/8 mech with Rush, and it costs 1 less for each friendly Treant that died this game. So, as you can see, you play Landscaping on 3, 2 Treants will already have died. So all you have to do is play Landscaping once, and you get a better Charged Devil Sword, right? It's one of the synergies. Look forward to seeing what additional Treant synergy they have. But yeah, now we kind of know what Druids are focusing on / going for in Boomsday.
Yeah. Treants.
Sexy. Yes, treants, trees, plants.
Trees.
Things that I never eat. Not enough protein.
All right. One of the things, I mean, the only thing that I find interesting about treants is that there is a card from way back in Classic that gave you treants. And
yes, there is.
You may not know about that card because
no.
especially if you're an Arena player, because you haven't seen this card in a while, because it got removed from Arena 2 years ago, along with cards like Snipe, cards like Charge, which now gives Rush instead of Charge, cards like I forget the person's name, that like 3-mana 2/3 that they like nerfed that used to be okay in Warrior that gave Charge.
Warsong Commander.
Yeah, Warsong Commander, right? Now it gives +1 to all minions with Charge. So, okay. So these may not be the cards you missed the most from the Arena, but they were taken away before the buckets, long before the bucket system became a thing, when it was needed to control for class balance. And I don't know. Now that the Treants are back, I think it's definitely time for them to come back to the Arena. And we have contacted Blizzard about this, so no idea what they're going to do. But it is an issue that Blizzard is aware of, and it seems like a pretty low-hanging fruit for them to make the Arena just a little bit better, right? Like, who doesn't want Snipe back in the Arena in the last bucket, right? Like, who doesn't want Ancestral Healing, which I still find to be an above-average card, back in the Arena? Who doesn't want more Treants in their new Treant thing?
Plus, the card was just fine.
Yeah, it was totally fine.
It was totally fine. Like, if you think of it, we're talking about Soul of the Forest, obviously. 4 mana that gives all of your minions Death Rattle, summon a 2/2 Treant. You know, if you hit it on 3 minions, that's good, right? Like, that's kind of good already. And Token Druid has always kind of been a thing. And now you actually have synergy with the Treants. So depending on where they bucket it, right? And probably a card like that will be poorly bucketed, or like, you know, like lowly bucketed.
That card was always like not even too under, like you were talking about, right? It's fine. It's a little more than fine now. Like, I think it was fine.
Oh, yeah.
Now you have cards, like normal cards, like Grim Necromancer, just a normal card, right? You have stuff like Shrieking Shroom that are just like very normal cards in normal buckets that you would just stick in your deck. And those cards did not exist back then. So it's a lot better now, I think, than it used to be.
Because the board state, if you looked at, you know, the board state from 2 years ago versus the average board state from today, today's board states are so crazy, right? So many more minions, so much messier. So a card like that, it's also why Bloodlust way back when was just not good, right? You know, yeah, you could create totems, but the board was so much easier to resolve back then, and now it's just
also why MCT, like back in Classic, was always a problem and people hated it. But now it's even more of a problem, and people hate it even more. Because it's just, before you could always play around MCT, you just like didn't want to. Now there's so many times, and by so many times I mean more than half the time, where you can't play around MCT, even if you knew your opponent had an MCT. Like, that's how silly MCT is right now.
Yeah, that's kind of it. So, anyways, it would be cool to see it back, and this is
the time for it, right? This is the time for it. You're bringing the Treant synergies back in.
Yeah. All right. So, Treants for Druid. Once again, it's always like every time we talk about something, it's always like, well, depending on how they bucket it, right? But this is something that we should definitely see a bit of, because as you can, or you know, if you're just listening to audio, there's another card, Dendrologist, 2 mana, 2/3 with Battlecry. If you control Treant, discover a spell. That's really good, right? So
because Druids needed more 2-drops. But hey, at this point, I'll take any 2-drops in any class, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So anyways, this is one of the themes that we're going to see. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is great, right? Like, Druids have a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop. I don't know what other classes are doing, but that seems very Kirby to me, right? We know one Hunter card is already a 3, not a drop, but like probably a drop, right? Like Spider Bomb, the 3 mana 2/2 that has a Death Rattle, destroy a random enemy minion. You don't need to use it as magnetic. like it'll trade 1-on-1 with any like other 3-drop. Like it's a viable 3-drop. And then you have like your Annoyal Module, which I think that's one of the new cards that came out. Which is a Paladin card, 4 mana, 2/4, Magnetic Divine Shield Taunt. So it's basically a lone champ on turn 4. But obviously, if it has Magnetic, it gets a lot better, right? Because you can like buff something with it, and then you can use the Divine Shield on the first turn with initiative, and you know it's very well statted. But even just on turn 4, playing on an empty board, you'll take a lone champ on turn 4. Like it's not great, but it's a 4-drop.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine. It's like how Cyclotron was okay-ish, right? On 5 as a 3/4 taunt Divine Shield.
They got a new Shaman card too. 2 mana, 2/2 Elemental, Battlecry, add a random elemental to your hand. And I'm just like literally listing down the list of like all of the cards that they have revealed that is not legendary or an epic. And you know what all of them are? This never happens, by the way, because they usually save curve cards till the very end because they're not as exciting because they have to be a curve card. So a lot of their value is already like in the fact that they are a curve card. So all the cards are already curve cards. I think one of the things that I was really excited about for Boomsday is coming true in front of our eyes.
Well, this is what Blizzard has always been doing, right? With small mana cards, they want to make sure that they still hold value in the late game, or they provide value for the late game, right? So that's sort of what they're doing. It's like, okay, you can have a 2/3, and then with a condition, you have a 2/2 that gives a benefit, right? We've seen this like so much now with like Tortollan Forager, with Raven Familiar, et cetera, et cetera. So this is nothing new. And then, you know, we have all those neutral mechs, right? So this week, it's been revealed that we're going to have neutral mechs, and 3 classes are going to focus on mechs as well. And we'll see more.
So the 3 classes that are focused on mechs are Hunter, Paladin, and Warrior. And if you remember, those are the 3 classes with the hand buffs from back in MSG.
Those are the Goons classes.
And Druids have Treants. If you remember, so Druids had Treants, and these 3 classes have the mechs. So I don't know what the other 5 classes are going to do, but this may be one of the more like directed sets, right? Where, because Blizzard kind of alternates between a set that's just kind of whatever, like you do whatever, and then a set that's like very directed. It's like, you will make this deck. You will make this other deck if you're that class. So like MSG was the biggest like problematic set of that era, where they made a lot of directed sets. You can think of like Old Gods as a directed set. I don't know what else is there, but like obviously the last one, the evens and odds thing, that's a directed set. Something like KFT is purposefully a little less directed because it has Death Knights, but Death Knights kind of go in everywhere and doesn't really have like the largest synergies with like particular decks. Kobolds and Catacombs. Yeah, that one. That long ago expansion from years past. That's also not a directed set where you could kind of just do whatever with the set of cards. But this one's shaping up to be a very directed set, which matters a lot in constructed, but it also matters in the arena, right? Directed sets make everything feel a little more samey. I think even more in arena than in constructed, because in constructed,
this is what everyone was complaining about for MSG, right? Yeah. It's like, you know, going into a priest matchup, what's going to happen. You know, going into sort of like a paladin matchup, exactly what's going to happen. And and
it's going to be worse this time around in terms of the sameness. In constructed, people don't like that things are samey, but they're kind of used to it at the same time because you can only have so many decks in the meta. So if you're like actually like rank 5 or above, rank 10 or above even probably, you're just facing meta decks anyway. There's only going to be so many meta decks. In Arena, you have like a good amount of diversity, and buckets have already limited that by making things more synergistic. And now when you have a directed set, keep in mind, this is the first directed set for the Arena. Witchwood was a directed set, but all the even and odd cards did not make it in the Arena. So it was directed for constructed. It was not directed for arena. In fact, for arena, it was a very undirected set where things were kind of everywhere and you didn't use a lot of the cards. If anything, it was like a failure of an arena set. if you look at it in the sense that you want the decks to make an impact and create a lot of like diversity and fun. Witchwood cards really didn't make an impact in the arena. But here, this Boomsday thing is going to come in, and these cards are going to be in the arena as far as we know. And with the bucket system that allows you to stack synergies, like Merps and I were just talking about earlier about how Dragon Priests are seen in the arena meta now, which is kind of not a new development, but it's definitely happening more so now than it did like a month, or like I guess 2 months at this point, 2 months ago, even though the meta is vaguely the same, just because people are playing around with it more.
Playing around with it more, plus Priest got buffed.
Yeah, Priest got buffed, which made people play around with it more afterwards too. But you can do that. It's not like, what synergies do Priests have with dragons right now? Like nothing. You have a Dustbreaker that's pretty over bucketed. But again, when you have a high synergy card that's over bucketed, that just means it's only getting picked when it's in a high synergy deck, right?
Yeah,
Tri-Gulch is over bucketed.
Matriarch a lot.
Right, but Matriarch is normally bucketed. Matriarch has no has no dragon synergy. Matriarch is just a dragon. That's different. It's just that's not something you get for using a dragon, right?
No,
synergies are made when you have cards that you get stuff for using dragons.
Right, it's just sort of like you get enough dragons and then you feel free to take the Dustbreakers. That's it. Because the Dustbreakers are just so backbreakingly good, right? And it's really hard as an opponent player to play around Dustbreaker. Like 3 damage AoE is just like super good.
You just don't play around it.
Yeah,
it is never, ever correct to play around the Dustbreaker.
Right. Which makes it even more crushing when it happens, right? No, I do the exact same thing, right? I don't play around the Dustbreaker because it's just not a good percentage play, which makes it super crushing when it happens.
But yeah, when it comes to a directed set, you'll get a lot more of those. And you didn't even see them as, like, you thought MSG was bad. This set's going to be worse. There was no bucket system in MSG. You still took best card available. Here, it's 3 times whatever MSG was giving you. Because it'll show up offering-wise 3 times. And you will take it every single time if you're going for a particular synergy. So okay, so maybe not 3 times. If it was a good card, it would have been, you would take it anyway over other cards a lot of the times, but at least 2 times as much.
Do you know what one card that we haven't talked about yet is going to sort of like, I think, define this expansion?
What card?
Upgradable Framebot.
Oh god, really?
It's so much. Okay, so if you guys don't know, Upgradable Framebot is a neutral 2-mana 1/5 mech. And the reason I think, look, obviously this depends on drafting, buckets, etc. It's a 2-drop that is so hard to kill, and it's a mech, right? That's available just like generally. And so what this does is it kind of almost guarantees board going into turn 3,
yes.
Or it's just something that is like super annoying and hard to kill for the mana cost. And then, you know, after you have this, you can throw your mech buffs, you know, your magnetic stuff onto there. So this is one of those things in which I think will end up really defining this expansion, just because of what it allows, right? First of all, it's a 2-drop, so it starts snowballs early, and it perfectly, you know, like, sort of goes into all of these neutral snowball possibilities. Yeah. I think there's like we're gonna see upgradable Framebot a lot, and it's gonna be like really annoying.
Yeah, it's a neutral card. I'm sure we'll see it a lot. If it gets buffed, it's annoying. If it doesn't get buffed, it's a very balanced card.
Yeah.
And like, how many buffs are there, right? Like, I don't know how many more neutral magnetic cards there's going to be. We have War Gear, and we may get like 1 more. So I don't know. We'll see what they release. But okay, enough about Boomsday. We'll talk more next week. The card reveals are hitting on Monday. So if you're listening to this on podcast or on YouTube, it's probably already hitting right now. You can safely tune back in to the Hearthstone news cycle and see all the exciting new cards as they come out. But before we get there, I wanted to squeeze in, and this is how much we care about control, where Merps did like an hour and a half on aggro, and we're gonna squeeze in like 20 minutes on control right now in a deep fried meta. Uh,
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Not too much longer. Okay.
20 minutes on control. Okay. So this is the opposite of aggro. We had people who asked about what if we did a control thing, and we're like, yeah, I'll do a control thing. I play control sometimes, and I was like, Merps, how often do you play control these days? So the good part about buckets is you don't have to play the way you don't want to anymore. Why? Because you're never going to be forced into a control pick, or like a control a draft. You will always be able to go like mid-range at worst if you want to go fast. So Merps will always start off fast, and then he will sometimes get pushed to mid-range, or at worst, late mid-range. You'll never play an attrition or control deck because he doesn't want to. So success on buckets. Anyway, I still start in the middle, which is where I like, which means oftentimes I get pushed either to aggro or control, and I like that as well. I think it brings a little more diversity. So I'll main this discussion about control here. The first thing you have to know about control is that we're not talking about attrition decks. There's a big difference between a control deck and an attrition deck. And you can tell the difference between a control deck and an attrition deck very, very, very simply. And the difference is, are you actively doing stuff? If the answer is no, then you are an attrition deck. That means you're just waiting for your opponent to run out of steam. You may have a bunch of taunts, you may have like a bunch of like heals, you may like curve out really well and then draw cards, but you're not like actively screwing with your opponents. Like, you don't punish your opponents for doing stuff. If you are a control deck, your entire job is to punish your opponents when they do stuff. If you guys played Magic from before, a control deck in Magic usually has a lot of like permission stuff to it because you're able to play on your opponent's turn. So it's a lot of like, I don't use my mana this turn. I wait for my opponent's turn. And whenever they try to do something, I then use my mana and say no. Or like, I don't know, like the things I wanted to do on my turn, I don't have to do to my opponent's turn because I could play cards on my opponent's turn. So why would I do stuff on my turn? And it very much feels like you're controlling the opponent. In Hearthstone, thankfully, it's not anything like that. If you're playing a control deck in Hearthstone, that just means you're not on the board. So a control deck in Magic can be on the board because you just choose not to attack and no one can hit your stuff that's on the board. A control deck in Hearthstone is very, very, very one-dimensional because you can't be on the board, because you don't have initiative, because your opponents are on the board, which means they get to pick what they attack, which means anything you put on the board is at a heavy, heavy, heavy disadvantage of value. So let's start there with how control is defined. Control is primarily defined by being able to do stuff from off the board to punish your opponents and not being able to do stuff with minions on the board because you generally don't have a board. You put those two elements together, you have a control deck. So what are the advantages for a control deck? Like, how do you draft a control deck? And this is also why you don't see a lot of control decks out there. It's kind of particular. I think it works a lot better than a attrition deck because you're more active. So especially if you're a good player, you get to like do more stuff. But at the same time, it's very hard to kind of put together. And you see a lot more control decks in the bucket system than you used to see because there's really a lot of players who like to play control. And a lot of these players, just like the players who like to play aggro, they really suck. And control's not unforgiving when it comes to this kind of stuff. Just like aggro is unforgiving in the arena. Mid-range is forgiving. You can make mistakes and win a mid-range game. You don't win the game if you make mistakes in control or aggro, unless you have the most ridiculous deck.
This is also why a lot of people recommend like paladins for beginners, right? Because paladin is a class that just like very much so tries to funnel you into a mid-rangey kind of style of play. But yeah, what you were saying with control, one of the things that defines control is the amount of removals, right? You definitely have a lot of removals that has a lot of answers, and this is one thing that is very attractive about the control play style. You're able to respond a lot. In fact, you have to respond a lot. Like that's sort of what you do, right? And a lot of people like that. They like the fact that they have these sort of safety blankets in their hand,
safety.
As opposed to
that is the key word. If you notice in Deep Fried meta for aggro, the thing was called risk in aggro because it was all about, and we talked about a lot, it's this risk analysis, that risk analysis. In control, it's the flip side of it. It's about safety. It's about how you can be safe.
Yeah, this is, and this goes to sort of what you're comfortable playing, right? It's funny because safety versus risk, it's all risk. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like it's all risk. It's just what you do when you play control is typically your options are you have a bit more time. You buy yourself more time, right? You buy yourself more time, and you have more options to go through. The analogy I made last week is, this poker analogy with like, if you're playing aggro, lots of times you feel like you're playing short stacked, right?
Mm-hmm.
With control, it's a slower game. The blinds are much smaller. You have time, and you can certainly make, like you can certainly make mistakes and you can certainly make plays here or there, but you don't feel as rushed.
Yeah, I mean, you have like you're playing for the tie. You're not playing for the win, because if it ties, you win.
Yeah.
So there's never a need to really play for the win. Just make sure your opponent dies. So how do you make sure your opponent dies when you're in control? Here's my the 5 pillars that I have for control in Arena. First, what you want are not just removals. A lot of people think, oh, I have a ton of removals, I'm a control deck. Kind of. But really, what you want, and this is what's different between aggro control and control. If you have a lot of removals, you actually should be an aggro control deck, because you can't control. Like, you're gonna lose to a lot of decks if you try to play aggro control. And I see this mistake being made by a lot of players, where they're like, oh, look at all these nice removals I have. I'm a control deck. You need 2-for-1 removals. You need removals that actually punish the opponent, and that punishes the opponent more than just on tempo. So what happens in control? You're generally losing tempo all the time. Why? Because you're not playing your 1-drops or 2-drops, or like, in order to respond to something, they have to do something first. So whenever you don't respond, and there will be times you don't respond, like, what happens, right? Well, what happens is you fall behind in tempo, because the game is built on tempo. And so if you have a removal that just kind of gets you tempo, and a good example of this is something like Shadow or Death, right? Like, what do you get from Shadow or Death, or like Sap or something? You get tempo. That's all you get. It's a hard removal. It's a 1-for-1 trade. You get a lot of tempo, which can buy you a little bit of breathing room. They're definitely good cards for control, but they're not like the best cards. Especially like something like Sap or Naturalize. Like, if you keep sapping or naturalizing your opponent, you're not going to win. They're going to win.
Unless your deck is only naturalized.
Unless your deck is only naturalized. No, they're still going to win. They're going to have multiple minions.
Well, no. Like, they're gonna have multiple minions, but you're gonna mill them.
No, you're gonna run out of cards before you, like, you're gonna run out of your hand before you mill them. The math doesn't work out.
No. In the arena, unless they have like tons of stuff that is, 1 card that generates 2 minions, you got them. You're good to go.
I feel like once they figure it out, they could play like 2-2-drops on turn 4, and then you're screwed. Like, from that point on, you gotta like naturalize.
Well, no, if they play 2-2-drops, that's 2 cards, and then you have 2 naturalizes.
Yeah, but you're running out of naturalizes, is my point. Because you only start with 3 cards, and you draw.
Well, yeah, I mean, the one turn in which they play like a Dragon Link mechanic, you're just like, oh crap, I'm down. Like, this 2-1 is gonna fall.
So I mean, well, no, you have a hero power. You need a little better than a Dragon Link mechanic to screw with it.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Anyway, back on topic so that we don't go 3 hours as people in chat think we're going to go.
It's important. All right, anyways.
All right, so you need 2-for-1 removals. What are 2-for-1 removals? I mean, anything that's like Shadow Madness is a good example of it, but also obviously any board clears, your Flame Strikes, your double-sided board clears, especially because you don't have a board. Even something that like removes something and generates a body. That's basically 2 removals in 1. So something like a Flanking Strike, something like a Mind Control. Those are better than if you're just getting tempo. Because what are you going to do with the tempo? You're a control deck. You don't really want to do anything with the tempo. You can only use tempo defensively. So that means you need another card to pair with your removal that actually does something. And if you're a control deck, you're usually like not big on having things to do that are actually good for you. So those like single target tempo based removals are not as good for you as for an aggro deck, or an aggro control deck is what they're best for. Because an aggro control deck puts out some smaller minions that try to stick on the board and remove everything else so the minions can go face, right? In that case, your tempo is very good for you because you're putting out more minions on the board. In a true control deck, your tempo is not really doing much for you. Second point for a control deck is card draws and cycles. Because you're responding to your opponent, you want to get a little bit of efficiency, like wherever you could. In fact, you probably will, right? Like your 2 mana cards deal 3 damage. It takes them usually 3 mana to put out something with 3 health. Like you'll just edge out a little bit of tempo here and there. Especially when you get to hard removals, right? Like you're gonna take some hard removals. You know, if you have a Shadow or Death, that's not bad, right? You may not have had other like options in that like top bucket that were better for you. So you Shadow or Death something. Well, now you have like 3 more mana left over that you can do whatever you want with. What do you do with it? Like we said, putting minions on the board is not terribly useful for control. It's fine, but it's more of like a, you know, here's a target for you to hit into, Mr. Aggro deck. Don't hit my face, please, than anything else. So you play a lot of card draws and cards that cycle. Cards that cycle is something like a Starfire or something, right? Like where you deal your damage and you use the little extra mana to get another card. Or strict card draws like Arcane Intellect, Thoughtsteal. You can use them when you get a little tempo advantage or when you're setting up for a board clear and you just like, you know, hey, I use my tempo to draw cards. You can really heavily tempo on the board out now if you want. What do you do? And they're like, I have a feeling I'm going to get board cleared. I don't really want to go all the way in on this. And so they don't, right? Like even if you don't have the board clear, they put like half their mana into the board and they spend the other half the mana doing nothing or pinging your face or whatever. And you can really eke out a lot of advantages like that. So card draws and cycles are a good way. Like you basically have to have ways to like do helpful stuff while using your mana without doing anything on the board. 3, you need to live. Like control decks eventually win, but they don't win if they die. So the point of eventually winning has a prerequisite of not dying. And I think a lot of people don't focus enough on the not dying part. And I know I'm guilty of this probably more than any of the other 5 points I'm going to go into in terms of how my control decks fail. And you really have to just heavily prioritize anything with the word taunt in it and things that heal you. In this meta, even in a mid-range deck, you want like 2-3 cards that heal you. That's just where the meta is right now. Because with the bucket system, aggro decks are much more finely tuned. And like even mid-range decks can switch into aggro rather flexibly. So you do need some amount of healing regardless. And in a control deck, you also need to stack on the taunts. Taunts are never useless. And you need to stack on the healing. Because remember, you don't have the board. So you're never going to run into the issue where your taunts are getting in each other's ways and you're no longer able to protect the minion you want to protect, which happens sometimes if you have too much taunt in a normal deck. This will never happen to you because you don't care what they hit. You just want them to not hit your face. Like, think of every minion you put out as fodder to set up the board for your board clears. And if they're inefficient, you knew they were inefficient. You're playing a control deck. You don't have the board. That's the price you pay. That's why you're drawing all these cards. That's why you're sticking all these like random stuff on the board that suck. Because they're supposed to suck. Okay, after that, another thing that you need as a control deck, and this is only true of Arena, you need to curve out. I don't mean you need 2 drops. I don't mean you need 1 drops, but you need your 3 drops. You can't like not have enough 3 drops to be playing on 3 and enough 4 drops to be playing on 4. Because you will get overrun. Like, what are you doing on turn 4 to swing the board so hard back that your opponents won't get like 20 free damage on you? Consecration? That doesn't work half the time. Like, you can't rely on anything there. So you need your 3 drops. So if you don't have a curve on like 1-2 because you wanted more cards for that card advantage thing we were talking about, then you need like 8 3 drops. Because you absolutely need your 3 drop. Because if you miss one of your first 2 3 drops, you lose. That's how the arena works. So don't think that just because you are a slower deck, you cannot have a curve. You always need a curve. You don't have to have an early curve, but your curve has to pick up on 3. And finally, the last thing that you can do as a control deck is lean into RNG. And I think that's also why we're less comfortable with control decks in general. Like a lot of people, and this is the big difference between like other games in control and Hearthstone control. In other games, control is the one in control, right? You know exactly what you're doing. In Hearthstone, not so much. Because it's attacker chooses, the person on the board actually has more control. They have more decisions to make. You as the control player have a lot fewer decisions to make. Like, if they give a card that you can punish them with, you punish them with it. That's not a very hard decision to make, right? That's why a lot of people like Control in Hearthstone too. This is not Magic the Gathering Control where you have to think a lot. Control in Hearthstone, you don't have to think for like the first 8 turns, and then you have to think. Sometimes you have to start thinking on turn 8 like really quickly because you have like 2 turns in which you do need to stabilize and punish, or else you're dead. But until then, it's really like a very straightforward game. Can I do something? No. Can I do something? No. Can I do something? Yes. But what you have with all of your control cards and your like 2-for-1 removals and your ability to like draw cards and whatever, is this is the area where you can take the risk, where you can take the RNG. Why? Because if you're an aggro deck and you take an RNG risk and it fails you, you're dead. You don't have the inevitability. You've hurt your tempo. You're out of steam, or you're like really significantly hurting yourself on steam. You do not want to take RNG when you're aggro because you're on that thin 1-turn line of winning or losing. Like, the RNG equivalent in aggro is whether you hit face instead of trading, right? That's like the risk. That's the risk assessment. The risk in aggro is not in RNG. The risk in control is in RNG. Like, if you think about how like Blizzard designs like their single player experience, right? What's like Time Tinker, right? That Toki the Time Tinker is their like RNG class. What is that? That's a control deck in a control class. Why? Because that's what control does in Hearthstone. Because you allow yourself the opportunity to more easily fix your mistakes later on, you can make more mistakes. But presumably, you're not making more mistakes, you're just taking more risk, right? Like, you can also fix your mistakes better, so that's also why a lot of people feel safer playing control. You just have those cards. But assuming you're not making those silly mistakes, you can still lean into RNG, which is not a mistake. It's just risk assessment. And that's a good source of value that, so here's the thing, right? Like, if you're a really good player, you still don't want to lean into RNG cards too much because they're still RNG, but you want to lean into it more as control and less as aggro still. If you're like an average player, like, RNG everything. Like, that's what control is good for, because even if you fail your RNG checks, you can still survive and punish your opponent the next turn, right? Like, you definitely get punished a little, but it's not the end of the game, so it's more worth it.
You still got like 3 minutes, man.
I'm not done.
I know you're not, but I'm saying, just remind you of the time.
All right, okay. So, why build a control deck? Actually, just how you play a control deck first. So we talked about what you're drafting, right? You're drafting RNG, you're drafting curve, you're drafting taunts and survivability, you're drafting card draws and cycles, and you're drafting 2-for-1 removals. So you drafted a bunch of those whenever you're given the options. It's the bucket system. You're not losing a lot of value when you draft them. Okay, great. How do you play? The first thing you need to do when you're playing, and you always should be doing this, but it's more important in control, is you have to watch your card advantage. Because aggro, especially not aggro, more like mid-range. Mid-range will sneak up on you with their card advantage because they're trading on the board. And they'll always eke out a little bit of card advantage here or there by having a minion survive some kind of trade. And you don't realize it. But eventually you're like, I drew 3 more cards than them. And then you look at your cards and you're like, I have 1 less card than they have. And you're like, this is not good. You need the inevitability as control to win because you're not dealing any damage to their face. Like, you have to win the game eventually. And so what that means is you need to keep an eye on your card advantage. And if the like tempo mid-range player is getting way too good on the board to you, even if they're not hitting you to the face, you need to find a way to do something about it. You need to get your card advantage back. And sometimes the way to get your card advantage back is to just realize they're going to keep trading and making efficient trades and just stop giving them your value. Just like start doing nothing. Start prepping your combos. Start like, you know, really being like, all right, you're going to spend all of your tempo next turn doing nothing. I'm going to draw a bunch of cards. Then I'm going to Psychic Scream you. Yes, I'm going to take like 15 damage to the face, but that's okay because you've been trading. You haven't been hitting me to the face. Because they can only do one thing. They can hit you to the face or they can trade. If they hit you to the face, they do not have a card advantage lead on you. They can't. If they trade, they may or may not, depending on how good the opportunities are for them to trade. So if they're getting a card advantage lead on you and you're control and they're not control, they are definitely trading. You definitely have a lot of health. You're fine. Set them up. And the other thing to do similar to that is watch your health, right? Always anticipate what would happen the next turn if their opponent just swings his entire board to your face and then clears your board some other way. because you're not on the board. It just takes them to have like one removal and you're not on the board at all, and they're hitting you to the face. So you always have to build that in every time you're playing control. And if they just get that one good swing in on you, it could be game over. So you have to, like, when you're being greedy, you have to watch out for your health. If your health and the board state is at a point in which if they have a removal, you lose the game, you shouldn't take that risk. You should play the safe way, whether it's as a priest healing your face one more time or like whatever. But you got to have a bit of a risk analysis for how greedy you can be in your setups and things like that. And finally, a lot of control players don't do this enough, which is you have to be aggressive, right? And people are like, oh, but I'm playing control, so I could just sit back and relax. And no, you have to be aggressive. If you have something you can play and you have the card advantage, play it. Don't just use your hero power. If you have the board for some weird reason and they don't give you a good thing to trade, hit their face. Like, you may not be great at the control at the aggro game, but don't pretend that their face doesn't exist. Especially if they're a class that can use their face to get tempo and card advantage, like Rogue, Warlock, Druid. Like, hurting them to the face really changes the way they can play. So in the weird situations in which you are on the board, especially if you're against another control deck or whatever, like, don't just stick to your game plan. I see a lot of control players just have this narrow mindset of like, this is my game plan, this is what I do. And especially as control, you can be more flexible about it than aggro. For aggro, a lot of times, okay, unless you're facing another aggro deck, switching to a control play is not really an option. But as a control deck, if your opponent just like happens to not curve out, you can be aggro. You can always be aggro. Or like mid-range or whatever, right? Like, and that's part of what's good about being a control deck. You have that flexibility in the way aggro has less of. And you should use that flexibility because it's part of your win rate.
I think something that people need to realize a little bit more is, depending on the situation, the more pressure you put on your opponent, the less significant a lot of their cards will be. Some cards are just like, they become so much worse when you are being pressured or you're behind, right? So in an even match, I mean, let's just take something very vanilla here. In an even match, Boulderfist Ogre is what it is, right? It's a decent card. It's a 6 mana, 6/7. It's gonna get its value, right? If both players are at like 25 HP, you know, you put it. The person who puts down Boulderfist Ogre, you know, feels pretty good. It's gonna do some work. Maybe get a 2-for-1. Maybe you know, get hit by a good removal. But you feel good that you're gonna get value out of the Boulderfist Ogre. If you're being pressured, that Boulderfist Ogre is worth nothing, basically. It's worth almost nothing. Or at the very least, it's worth very, very little because of the state that you're in. You plop that down, and then you go down to 3 HP, and suddenly anything kind of kills you, right? So I think that's something in which people forget about as well. So whether you're aggro or control, if you have an opportunity to invalidate or make a lot less valuable some of your opponent's cards, you got to take that, because that is card advantage by putting on pressure, basically.
Yep. That's basically control. I know I'm over my 20 minutes. I will add 2 more points to this. One is a way you can go in control decks that you can't go in aggro as much is combos. And I mean like a combo. Like, I have card A, I have card B. If I have both of them in my hand, good things are going to happen. If you're playing aggro, that's not going to happen that often. If you're playing control, that will happen like not an insignificant amount of times. And so you really have to think about that when you're drafting. So that's why control is the place for decks. Even decks that look like the card itself may be like sort of aggro, like Dry Gulch. People look at it as like, oh, it's like a 2-drop. No, it's a control card. It's more importantly, it's a combo card. Like, you have to play it. You don't gain any tempo on turn 2. You could have had another card. Like, you have to get it out at some point and eat the tempo loss. And eventually, you get to set up a Silver Hand combo. That's really what the purpose of that card is. It's a control card. You play it in control paladins. And combo paladins. What do you combo with? Silver Hand stuff. You can combo it with something like Silver Sword also, even though that's not like the best combo. But you get some value out of it. And it's bucketed really high because people only use these cards in those types of combo decks. And you should keep that in mind if you're playing Control. It's always a good place to be looking for combos. So if you really like those, like, I know people go crazy over the possibilities of like having these 2 cards in their deck all of a sudden be in their hands. Well, if you're a Control player, that'll happen like every 3rd game, maybe every 4th game. That's pretty consistent. If you're an aggro player, it'll happen like once every like 6 to 8 games, which is like once or twice a run. And, you know, less impressive. So it's definitely a good place to draft those kinds of game-winning and game-swinging things. One last thing is, don't fall into some of these traps. We talked about Shadow or Death and Sap and Naturalize as like tempo traps, where if what you're gaining from this like really good card that looks like it's a control card is tempo, then you're not supposed to put it in a control deck. Like, it's fine in a control deck, but it's not where you're getting the most value. It goes in aggro control. Same thing with weapons. You may think, oh, weapons, you talked about 2-for-1 removals. All weapons are 2-for-1 removals. Great. Well, weapons are 2-for-1 removals over 2 turns. You're getting hit in the face by the other thing in the middle of that turn, and you have to take face damage twice to use the weapon. So you're losing out on this taunt and survivability like kind of like thing, pretty hardcore when it comes to weapons. You do effectively get another card draw because the weapons are 2-for-1s, and they are sometimes curve play, so you have to like weigh it. But you generally lean away from weapons towards other control cards if you have the option. Like, weapons are like secondary control cards. And the third trap is healing cards that just heal. Like, I see people think, oh, I'm a control paladin, I'm going to draft a Holy Light. They're still bad. They don't get that much better in a control deck. Why? Because you're losing card advantage, which is something you need. So then you have to make up for it. And you're not on the board, so you can't generate it from the board. And especially if you're Paladin, you don't really generate card advantage unless you've used up all of your cards. And then you have your Divine Favor, or you're on the board and then you have your Blessing Wisdom. There's really no... okay, fine. Lay on Hands, one epic card that can generate your cards. But other than that, you really don't have a lot of way to generate your card advantage. So a Holy Light's a pretty crappy pick. Druid and like their healing card is a better pick, but I think that card may be... No, that card's still in the arena. Maybe it's out of the arena. I don't even know. But the point is, if a card's main goal is to heal you and does very little else, that's not the best card for a control deck. You want it to like heal you and do something. Like Rotten Apple Bomb, great control card, right? Holy Light, not so much. So that is, yeah. That's a little rundown of Control. And you can play Control with any class, including Hunter. In fact, right now, Control Hunter is apparently one of the better Hunter playstyles out there. I only know this because every time, and I've been getting like more than 10 wins quite frequently in the last few weeks. And every time I get up there, I'm like, I'm seeing all these Hunters. They're not curving out. I'm almost losing to them. That's definitely like a valid playstyle. So if Hunter is up there as fair game for Control, all your other classes are also up there. Probably the worst class for a Control playstyle is actually Paladin. That's why I hate on Dry Gulch so much. It's so overbucketed for an archetype that doesn't work very well in Paladin in this meta. The other archetype of being on the board and going for your mid-range game or even an aggro game works so much better. Like, you have your big weapons that can go face or can get value, but you need your face to like be healthy to do that. Like, there's just so much stuff stacked up against it. So I would say if you're wondering about which class not to go Control with, it's probably Paladin, and all the other classes are okay. Warrior is kind of bad at doing anything with, but so maybe also not Warrior, but in theory it should be able to go Control, right? You have all of your healing already like pre-done for you, but you are missing your removal stuff, so you need like Reckless Flurries and like other cards that are hard to get. So maybe Paladin and Warrior don't go Control.
All right, cool. Not a shade under 30 minutes.
All right, that's good. That's good. Okay, so that's it for the Hearthstone wrap up. Let's move on to question from the GOAT.
Question from the GOAT. So, Adukta, you have been hinting at an announcement of some sort. You've been telling people to guess what it is. I think it's time to tell everyone what's the big secret. What is the big announcement from you personally?
Okay, so one, I'm very disappointed in everybody. No one figured it out and told me about it. this is very disappointing because once you hear the news, you're like, oh, that's actually kind of big. And also, it just shows you how like disconnected certain communities on the internet are. Like communities that I thought would be like fairly connected, not at all. Okay, so we had the 2 announcements before in the earlier part of the week, right? We have Lightforge now has buckets. That's a pretty big deal. There was also a big curve update that went with it. I won't talk too much about that. And then we also got a new sponsor, Honey. They're a sponsor, and if you use our link when we're in Twitch to download the app, it does we get paid for it, so that's good. And Honey, if you don't know, is a browser extension that helps you find coupons. It just works very automatically in the background. Like you don't actively do anything, and you just save money here and there, assuming you buy stuff online. So we're very excited about that. But for my personal announcement, and I will do something more formal about it later, because we're just ramping up the reveal for it. I was under an NDA until Monday of last week. Actually, until like Tuesday of last week, where I couldn't actually like tell anyone about this, but I am officially a game designer now, as like a job. This is legit. It's with a real company that makes games. The game I am currently a part of just got announced 2 weeks ago. It's called Gods Unleashed. It is a card game that does attacker chooses style combat, which is very, very similar to Hearthstone's rule set, although there are things that are going to be different. I am the lead balance designer and like one of a small team of game designers, so I get like a hand in everything from like initial design of cards to and obviously all the balance parts of the cards. And you can check out the website, godsunleashed.com. The cool part about this game, and here's like the 2-minute pitch for it, is not that, hey, here's a card game that Aduk does helping design. It's that here is going to be the first Ethereum-based and the first crypto-based, period, trading card game. And it's a trading card game because you have actual virtual assets. You have coin assets that represent each of the cards. And the game itself is not going to be played on the blockchain because that'll be like expensive and, you know, terrible for everybody. But the cards themselves are coins that we can't change. Like once we publish it out into the world, we can't like nerf a card anymore. So that's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to designing for this. It's like every card, you can ban them from a tournament later or something. Like we could definitely do that technically because we run the tournaments. But the card just exists. So it's the same as if it were an actual physical paper card game, except it's using virtual assets. And if this company, it's with Fuel Games, if this company goes down in the future, everybody with the cards can just like start a new program, run it, and then use the same cards. So it's like the first time you can actually have a virtual asset that is not tied to a server. And that is very exciting to me. I have, like some of you know, I have a doctorate, and for a while I thought I was going to lean that towards like some virtual asset things, and that ended up not. But it's just always been an area of interest to me. And as far as gaming goes, it is the next step, and it is a very important step, I think, because I used to be a Magic player, and I would have a lot of cards, and I'm not a physical collector. So they just kind of took up space, and I wanted to play them on like Magic Online, and it like didn't work. I had to buy new cards, and then like now Magic Arenas come out, or like in beta or whatever, and I'm like, well, now my Magic Online cards can't be transferred, and right, it's all this stuff, and that just won't ever be the case with this game. And it's the first one. They're doing a pre-sale right now, so if you go on the website, they're like pimping the pre-sale, and the pre-sale is a bunch of cards that I balanced, and a lot of the cards in there, in my opinion, some of the cooler cards in there are ones I designed from scratch, and also you know, it's a way to raise money for the game. But regardless of how much money we raise for the game is happening. This is like we have funding from like Coinbase, and I think this is, yeah, it has a very large amount of funding, I think, for a game launch from a small indie company. I was like actually very surprised by how well capitalized they were. Okay, anyway, enough about that. I'm not going to talk too much about it because this is the Lightforge. This is a Hearthstone related podcast. We are a Hearthstone related stream, and this game as a game is not going to come out for like quite a few months. So until then, you get to see some nice pre-release cards, which is, you know, some of them you'll see like as Hearthstone homages, where we took like existing Hearthstone cards and made them actually balanced, just so they don't screw up our game the way they've screwed up Hearthstone games. But it's interesting, and especially if you have any interest at all in crypto, or you believe in the technology behind blockchain, it's a good investment, I think. Not necessarily to like make a crap ton of money in the future, but as in you can now play the first game that's going to be on a blockchain, and you can see how that is and how that's different than playing Magic or playing Hearthstone. So it's cool.
Now, if you have any complaints about the game, it's just you have no one to blame but yourself.
Oh, that's true. Oh, and because I'm the balance designer, all the cards are balanced for limited. And because I'm one of a few gameplay designers and they shared the vision, I like made sure they shared this vision before I got on board with it, which is that limited will be a heavy focus of this game. There will also be focus on constructed as well, but it's going to be like 50-50. You know, or like very similar to 50-50. This is not going to be a Hearthstone thing. And they have there's a Battle Royale mode that we've kind of sketched out the ideas for. That's going to be our first limited format with more to come. So there's that. So back to my whole like why I'm disappointed with everybody thing. I made these like vague announcements to get people to like dig up what I've been doing. The website launched like 2 weeks ago. It had my name on there. Like, I'm in the About Me section. It was like an article on PC Gamer like 2 weeks ago. They did some like advertising for it. The real marketing push hasn't started yet. So you'll be hearing more about this game in the coming months as we lead up to like an actual beta. And what else? I'm on their subreddit. I'm also like, if you guys don't know, there's a subreddit called ETH Trader, which is for people who trade ETH. We were the #1 post on it a few days back, like with like 400 upvotes, which is a lot for that subreddit. And I like answered questions on there. So if you like stalk my Reddit, or if you like are an active member or like a lurker on ETH Trader, you would have seen this game. And like, I don't know, just no one put the pieces together. And no one was like, hey, by the way, oh, I'm also on their Discord, like as one of the mods. And my name starts with an A, Adwukta, so it's at the very top. So if you ever entered their Discord, you're like, oh, there's Adwukta. But
you're assuming people care about you way too much.
No, man. I'm assuming one person. I'm assuming there's one person who cares about me and knows about me. And
well, now you know,
nobody cares about me. You. None of the arena community and the ETH community are like linked in that way. And I thought there would be a lot of overlap, because it's like a virtual card game, and that's like a virtual currency. Well, vaguely currency. Kind of up in the air what the actual like token for, or the actual coin of ETH is actually there for. But still, I thought someone would get it. No one got it. That's fine. I also didn't want to like actually talk too much about it, because I could go on and on and on and on and on. And if you talk to my girlfriend brand new, she knows I go on and on and on and on about it. Like if you're someone who's played Hearthstone at this level for so long, like you have a lot of complaints about the game, and we certainly have a lot of complaints about this game. And we always think, oh, we could make it better. Like who knows how much better, but definitely like somewhat better. And then here comes the opportunity. I'm like, oh, I could actually make something that's impactful and better, and this could blow up. And so I took it. So that's the announcements. It's again, the game's called Gods Unleashed. Buy a pre-sale pack. It's $5 for the cheapest packs. The more expensive packs, if you want to be an actual collector, they have a foil system where it gets like more and more fancy. And it's kind of needed to keep the economy in control, because like we want the game to actually be accessible to like normal people. It's a real game, and the assets are real assets. So it's going to be priced more like Magic the Gathering than Hearthstone. So it's going to be a little more expensive than what you're used to. But definitely, I think we're hoping it's going to be within range for like a normal, non-crazy hobby. And these are cards that you can.
What was it called again?
Gods Unleashed. Unchained. Oh my God. Gods Unchained.
Wow. Oh man, they're running a tight ship over there, Mr.
This is why when I mispronounce people's names and when I like don't remember card names, like people are like, "Oh, how could you not remember?" Like I've put like God knows how many hours into this in the last few months, and like the name is always right there, and I still don't like exactly know it because I've been calling it GU for the longest time.
You know, I'm surprised you don't start off with like, "Welcome to the Fight Lords podcast with your host, Tadwapa and Burps."
All right. Okay.
Credit where credit is due. You know, I mean, good job. Good job.
Sakamadu says, that Grinning go, no wonder I was finding nothing that had to do with the games when I Googled it. Sorry. Gods Unchained. What do we have so far that I can tell you about it? I kind of want to like give a little bit of information so you don't just look at the cards and be like, this is kind of like Hearthstone, because it is. But one of the cool things we're doing with it is there's going to be multiple hero powers for each class, and you are going to be able to select a hero power based on your matchup. So you select it in the beginning of the game when you mulligan. And that will open up a lot of design space. So we may have fewer like gods than Hearthstone has heroes, or the Magic the Gathering has like color combinations or whatever. But the actual amount of diversity in the gameplay, we want it to be larger. And one of the reasons I love that design is that it makes every like constructed deck have to be a lot more flexible, because you get so much advantage for being able to shift from one hero power to another rather than just like locked in on like, this is my hero power, I make dudes, I'm gonna always make dudes, or I'm a warrior, I'm gonna keep hitting the hammer button, or I'm an aggro hunter, I'm going to be hitting the steady shot button every single time I can. So now you can actually find a matchup that's unfavorable and switch, and they'll switch with you. So that means decks that are very, very, very strategically like inclined to go down one path only are going to be at a disadvantage to decks that are more flexible. So encouraging more flexibility, more strategy, more thinking, a little bit more limited flavor. That's where we're trying to put our thumb on the scale on that game.
Cool. Well, congrats. I look forward to all the perfectly balanced and
cards.
Fair cards that are going to come in this game.
Like, seriously, think about the balancing issues. Like, when I like that's happening with this game. These cards are forever, and you can't nerf them. Like, I'm sitting here like sweating bullets, being like, "Oh my god, we have testers and stuff. Like, you better find all the combos I'm not thinking of." Because I have like a system with like, you know me, right? Formulas, algorithms, all this stuff getting built in the back to make sure everything's balanced. Like, well, one, to make sure I know what the value of these cards are and the value of the combos that are coming out are. But two, to like, you know, make sure like things don't get out of control. And but you have to think of the thing first before you can test it, you know? So I'm spending a lot of time like trying to be like a constructed player and a deck builder. Although I normally am a deck builder anyway, so we'll see. The problem is it's going to be very, very embarrassing if we actually go live and there's immediately like some kind of like infinite combo that we need to ban a card for. Because again, right, we can't nerf cards, so we would have to ban a card, and we're not planning to do that. So that's like my goal number one, is to not have a broken combo right out of the gate.
Well, I'm sure nothing possible will go wrong with you at the helm. I mean, you do things so well. Simple things like remembering the name of the game that you're designing.
Tulok says, Grinning Goat, has the game bounties and airdrops? They do have airdrops. I'm sure they'll have bounties at some point. But they airdropped some extra packs to the early investors last week. Like, the vision for this game and the funding for this game is that it's going to be a huge scope, is the goal. Like, this is not, and it's set up for it. This is not one of those games where it's set up to like, hey, if we can survive, this is like a huge success. This is one of those games where the vision from the founders are, oh my god, right? Like, I'm a game designer for this game. It's not like my game. I didn't come up with it. I didn't, you know, I just making sure that the game part of it works well, and coming up with some ideas to make it fun for the community and the people who play it. But the actual founder, the founders, like when they told me their vision, I was like, wow. This is like they're trying to bring like the actual like world of Yu-Gi-Oh style thing to like reality, in a way that if it is successful, it'll be bigger in scope than Magic like is, and Magic is huge. So that's the upside, and that's the goal.
Cool. All right. Well, once again, looking forward to this, but back to Hearthstone, we got an expansion to look out for.
Yeah.
Going to be more talk about that next week. And after that, we're nearing the release. So I'm sure we'll have more to talk about, probably 1 or 2 more themes. And we'll think of something else to talk about next week. But looking forward to the new cards. Anything to add?
Nope. Looking forward to talking about all the new cards that come in and hopefully finding a card I really like. I hate the mulch system, by the way. Like, I don't know if I said it when you were describing the mulch system. I kind of just tuned out and was like, let's wait for Marbs to stop talking about mulch cards, because mulch cards are mulch cards in the arena.
You mean Treant?
Treants, exactly.
Wow.
I'm great with words.
Okay.
That's what the W in Advicta stands for. Words. Until next week, this is Advicta.
This is Burps. See ya.
See ya.